Today I have the pleasure of getting an update from James Kenny of Frontier Rare Earths. How are you today, James?
Good morning, Tracy. I'm well, thank you.
James, we've had a very challenging year, of course, in the rare earth market, and we noticed that you haven't put out as many news releases as you have traditionally. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
We're of the view that what is newsworthy merits a news release. We are in a long and very deliberate process of preparing a pre-feasibility study, of which there are many constituent parts. And although we've made significant progress over the last 12 months and particularly over the last quarter, as we recently announced, we see these as being just part and parcel of preparing a study. And I think the newsworthy event really is the completion of that study and the results contained therein. So I think perhaps the relative lack of what some might describe as news sort of from us is not any indication of a lack of activity within the company, but just a longer lead time for the main body of work that we're involved in now.
All right, well, that leads me obviously to the next question, which is, of course, you've been working towards the pre-feasibility study. Can you give us an update on that?
Yes, Tracy, delighted to. We've been working very hard over the last 12 months on completing the pre-feasibility study for the Zandkopsdrift Project. The study will reflect a development of a mining operation and a standalone rare earth separation plant, all to be located in South Africa on two locations approximately 300 kilometers apart. Work has proceeded pretty much as we had anticipated. One of our studies in relation to the separation plant was slightly delayed in its starting, but is well underway now. And as we advised very recently, our expectation is that all of the constituent studies underlying the pre-feasibility study will be concluded and the results announced at the back end of Q1 next year. And we are expecting that this will again demonstrate the robust economic proposition that Zandkopsdrift represents.
All right, and for those of our InvestorIntel audience that would like to know a little bit more about Frontier Rare Earths, let me just remind our audience that you have, what, 1 million tons of heavy rare earths, is that correct? Enough to supply the world with 10 years of heavy rare earths?
Well, in gross terms, you are correct. We have a resource of approximately 950,000 tons, so close to 1 million tons of rare earths. And at global annual consumption, that would be broadly enough to supply the world for 10 years. Obviously, that's not our objective. And our plan is to develop a mine and separation plant, which in its first phase will produce close to 8,500 tons of separated rare earth oxides, and then doubling that to a phase two of 16 to 17,000 tons of separated rare earth oxides. Based on our current resources, that would give us a mine life of close to 45 years. So we think it's a very significant resource, one of the largest under development outside of China, and positions us very well going forward.
All right, so let's talk about this move towards production, of course. Can you give us a little bit more of an overview about your location and your infrastructure, please?
I'd be delighted to, Tracy. The Zandkopsdrift deposit is located approximately 450 kilometers north of Cape Town, so at the tip of the continent of Africa. It's in a very well developed part of the world, and it's actually located in the Northern Cape province of South Africa. And the Northern Cape province is the oldest mining province in South Africa, which has a history of mining of approximately 150 years. So there's a very well understood regulatory code and permitting environment. Mining is understood and is accepted widely by the local communities. And so in that latter regard, we do not anticipate any of the issues that some of our peer companies are or may experience in other parts of the world where there is much greater sensitivity regarding the development of new mines.
Speaking of competitive advantages in our particular sector, you just put out your third quarter financial statements, and of course you have some money in the bank, which many of the companies in the rare earth industry are, and it's true, running out of capital. Can you talk to us a little bit about your recent announcement?
Yes, Tracy, we are in a fortunate position. Equity markets are obviously quite challenged at the moment, and the appetite for junior explorers and developers is much more limited than it was several years ago. At present, we have just under $30 million of cash and no debt. And so that serves Frontier well to complete our pre-feasibility study and our definitive feasibility study. And I think that is a pretty unique position, certainly amongst our rare earth junior peers.
Frontier Rare Earths, of course, as well has one of the most intriguing end-user agreements in the world with Chorus, but I'm not going to ask you about that. Instead, what I want to ask you about is what should we anticipate as shareholders over the next year moving forward in Frontier Rare Earths, James, because I know you have a great plan.
Well, our plan is as we have set out. Our focus at present is very heavily on completing the pre-feasibility study, and then clearly together with our partners in Cores to move into the next phase, which will be the initiation and completion of a definitive feasibility study. It would be our hope that we can undertake a significant portion of the work required to allow the drawdown of project finance for the development of the Zandkopsdrift project in parallel with the definitive feasibility study, and thereby shorten the lead time between completion of the definitive feasibility study and the commencement of construction. However, we aren't the determining factor as to whether or not the equity capital markets or the debt capital markets are open for business. But what I do believe is that there remains a very clear and obvious demand and requirement for the development of several new rare earth mines. And I think with our pre-feasibility study and the support of our partners in Cores and with others, we will be very well positioned to be one of those companies and one of the early ones.
Well, thank you so much for the update today, James. It's nice to hear from you.
You're very welcome, Tracy.